It looks good.
Yep.
Thank you.
It's working, Holly.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Mari and Zachary. Awesome. Perfect. So, like I said, my name is Holly. So this is the Hispanic Center. So before we get into any of the details on who we serve and how we serve, etc., I just want to touch base on these terms here and their distinctions. So you'll hear me going in between Hispanic, Latino, and Latinx interchangeably. So Hispanic mainly focuses on the Spanish-speaking origin, right? So this includes Spain. However, Brazil isn't included because they speak Portuguese there. Now, Latino, it refers to people of Latin American origin. So this does include Brazil and Trinidad and Tobago, but it excludes Spain because it's over in Europe, right? So Hispanic is basically based on whether you and your family speak the language of Spanish, whereas Latino is focused more on the geographic location or your origin. And then Spanish is primarily referring to the language, or if you originate from Spain, which would be your nationality. So moving on. So some of you may have heard and become more familiar with the term Latinx. So this is a person of Latin American origin or descent, but it is a gender neutral or non-binary alternative to Latino or Latina. So as you may know, that in the Spanish language, everything is really referred to as kind of a feminine or a masculine. And so to be more inclusive, people have come up with Latinx to be more inclusive for the LGBTQIA+ community, to make sure that they are feeling inclusive and represented as well. So the X replaces the standard A and O endings in Spanish, Portuguese, and other related languages. And then, so overall, when you're trying to be gender neutral, the Hispanic community or Latinx community are both acceptable forms. Okay, so a little bit about us at the Hispanic Center. So we were founded in 1978. So we're located in the heart of Roosevelt Park, which is the largest Latino neighborhood in Grand Rapids, which is the center. So we're able to serve about 20 to 30 individuals daily. So that's just kind of an average. It depends what events we have going on and what different services we have. But essentially, we focus on the common thread that unites all people, so which is a desire of understanding and respecting our differences. So the way we do this is by advocating for the dignity of every individual, providing access to services that create equity, and investing in relationships within the community to ensure that our services continue to impact lives. So we're not limited to Grand Rapids. We seek to address the needs of all Latinos in West Michigan. Our staff is largely bilingual and multicultural. And so we understand our Latino neighbors, we can connect with them and work to achieve self-sufficiency together. So that takes us to our mission at the Hispanic Center. So our mission is to advocate, educate, and empower. So it's pretty simple. We are the fastest growing demographic, and we need our community members to become our next leaders, teachers, legislators, politicians, etc. So we truly believe in the advancement of Hispanics here in West Michigan. We want them to be able to create a diverse, talented, and bilingual workforce that will carry the sustainability of our economy. Okay, so who do we serve specifically? So this would be Latinos or Hispanics who are impacted by the conditions in which they are born, grow, live, work, and age. So we serve Latinos or Hispanics who are US born, who are immigrants, asylum seekers, who came over for really any reason. The Hispanics are the nation's largest minority group and among its fastest growing populations. So according to the US Census Bureau back in 2013, the Hispanic population in 2012 was 53 million, making up about 17% of the US population. Okay, so a little bit more about the Hispanic Center. So we have 4 different programs to support the community. So starting with family support services, as I was saying, Marisol is a part of that program and department. So they focus on basic needs, health and wellness, Civil and Human Rights, and then GED in Spanish. Just to kind of give a broad overview, because they do many more detailed things. They have been really amazing during this pandemic, making sure that people are receiving food through food distribution with La Lucha funds, making sure that people are receiving financial assistance, those who fall outside of the system and who aren't receiving those stimulus checks. Yeah, they're really incredible people. And then we have workforce development, and they focus on recruitment, referral, and retention services, along with unemployment claims, especially during this pandemic. They also focus on career coaching and short-term training. And then next we have youth and education. So we have La Escuelita, which is our bilingual preschool. We have Éxito Educativo and CDBG, which provides like 14 to 24-year-olds paid internships and additional educational support. And then that brings us to our department. So language services specifically. So we have a team of expert Spanish interpreters and translators with specialties in a variety of areas. So we have over 40 years of experience, and then our team uses their cultural and industrial experience to break down communication barriers and to guarantee confidential, accurate, and efficient results, not only for Grand Rapids, but all of our West Michigan clients. We also serve individuals in the community as well. That would be if they need any individual or personal documents translated, or if they have an immigration hearing that's where the interpreter is not already provided. So we do corporate services, and then we do individual services as well. So our language services department is one of the few services at the Hispanic Center with a charge. So the revenue is essentially generated and reinvested into the Hispanic Center and then the community as a whole. Whoops, sorry. Okay, so just to break down our services further, so we, like I said, we specialize in Spanish and its native languages such as Quiche, Kekchi, Mam, etc., and some of its dialects. But we offer both interpretation, which is the spoken word or signs, and then written translation in over 80 different languages. And so we are actually currently onboarding with a new system, which will be accessible to you, which is exciting. So you'll have access to on-demand services for interpretation over the phone and video in over 250 languages, something crazy like that. So we're really excited to be able to offer that in the coming weeks. And Kimber, I'll make sure to share all of that information and how to access those once we're all set, because we're still onboarding, but it's really exciting. We're almost there. So each service, as you see, will come with its own mode of communication and formats, along with different areas of service. So in our department, language accessibility is our top priority. For those who identify as limited English proficiency speakers, or LEPs as we like to call them, they're commonly left out of community services, important health information, and so much more, because it's simply not interpreted or translated for them. And so they're not receiving that information in their native language, and so they're not receiving that information at all, or it is very, very much delayed, which, as you can see in a pandemic, is kind of scary. So I know you guys wanted to know how to use our services. So as I said, we both offer interpretation and translation in over 80 languages. So like I said, I'm going to share as much information with Kimber to make it easy for you, probably in a Word document, kind of step by step, because there's multiple ways in order to access, that you can access our services. So I'll make sure to share that step-by-step process with Kimber. But basically,
Holly, I do want to just step in real quick so we don't have confusion. So because we're primarily volunteer-based, our staff is going to be the one that submits the request. So it'll just be myself or Danielle. So just for the volunteers on the call, you can ignore this. You won't be making the request. I don't want to confuse you all. So that will all go through Danielle or myself or Carrie.
Awesome.
So you're welcome to feel free to go through this, Holly. Definitely feel free. But just for the volunteers, we'll be making those requests so that we can navigate the funding side of it.
Gotcha. Sorry about that.
No, I just wanted to make sure I said it before people got confused or stressed out.
Awesome. Yeah. So Alejandro, if you wanted to introduce yourself, he might be one of the ones that you're interacting with.
Sure, yeah. Can you see me? This is my first time doing it from the phone, so I'm not sure if it worked.
Oh yeah, we can see you.
Okay, perfect. So hi everyone, I'm Alejandro, and like Holly said, I am primarily dealing with the written translations. So anything you might need, whether it's a Word document, a PDF, PowerPoint, in just about any language you might need, you can let me know. I'd be happy to help with that. And you know, any other information if you're requesting that you can include, such as who the intended audience is for example, if it's for people who have recently immigrated to the United States from a different country, or maybe it's people from that country who are currently living there. Anything like that would be really helpful so that we can help get a great final product. And then as well as the desired deadline. So anytime that any timeline you might have, we can usually make it work. Just let us know and we are usually available. Sometimes we get requests for a couple hours from after we get them and we're able to make it work. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So there's multiple ways in order to access an interpreter. So we'll make sure that Kimber has all that information along with the translations. So skipping ahead to how to interact with interpreters, I know that it may seem cumbersome to have to speak through an interpreter in order to communicate with Spanish-speaking clients or really any other language that you may not speak yourself. But I would just recommend looking at it as an opportunity and pretending like they're not there. So basically, what you want to do is when they arrive, whether it is over the phone, over video, or in person, you want to make sure that they introduce themselves. So they're going to let you know their name, that they're the interpreter. Everything will be kept confidential. Please speak directly to one another, and any additional information that they may want to include there. And basically that just allows them to set up the interpretation encounter in a professional way and making sure that it is successful. And then, like I said, you want to make sure that you're speaking directly to your client, whoever you're serving in the house or over the phone. And so that you're not saying, oh, can you communicate this to her? Or what did she say, kind of thing. You want to make sure that you're speaking directly to them as if the interpreter wasn't there at all. And then speak in short sentences. So most of the interpretation that you're going to encounter would be consecutive or paused interpretation. So you want to make sure that you're speaking in shorter sentences so the interpreter can interpret accurately and make sure to include all the information. They should be taking notes, but still it's a bit better to just speak in shorter sentences so they don't have to summarize that information. And then on site, Kimber, you and I can figure this portion out. But for some of the volunteers, depending on how it works out, if there is an on-site interpreter, we do ask whoever is on site to confirm that the interpreter was there. So we might need to sign a verification form, but Kimber, you and I can figure that portion out. So I just wanted to mention it here for you guys. Okay, do you guys have any questions about that? I know I went through a lot of stuff already.
Looks great. I'm trying to like get some dinner in. So sorry, I'm turning my video off.
Oh, no, you're good. You're good. No worries. Just let me know if you guys have any questions as we go along, okay? Okay, awesome. So moving on to the next section. So I wanted to go over some of the needs of the Hispanic community and the gaps that we at the Hispanic Center are looking to address. And then this is kind of how we can point out some of the adversity. So I know that you, in your initial volunteer training, do review adversities that your clients may be experiencing. So basically the Hispanic families in our community may experience adversities through poverty, through falling outside of the support system, whether that be financially, depending on their status, and so many other ways. In addition to the current COVID situation, them being more highly affected and more frequently affected by getting COVID themselves, or they are also dying at a higher rate than the white community. So Hispanics is the nation's largest minority group and among its fastest growing populations. So like I said, they make up, back in 2012, they make up 17% of the US population. So according to I'm just going to go through some of the items on the screen. So according to the Pew Research poll, Latinx people are the second most discriminated against ethnic group after African Americans. In 2011, less than 30% of the Hispanic students graduated from high school, and less than 4% earned advanced college degrees. And then also in 2011, Hispanics had the highest dropout rate, 17% for students aged 16 through 24. And then there are also 22% report experiencing workplace discrimination compared to 6% of whites. So can anyone tell me why these things may be happening?
I would guess that we have a system in place that supports workplace discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
I would guess that there's a language barrier that keeps people from asking for what they need.
Mm-hmm.
Those are just a couple guesses.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. You're exactly right. So there are multiple reasons. So just starting with institutional inequity. So this refers to the unjust and discriminatory mistreatment of an individual or group of individuals in society, and by society and its institutions as a whole. So I know we've been talking a lot about institutional racism, and I'm going to touch base on this in a bit as well. But it stems from the systemic stereotypical beliefs, such as sexist or racist beliefs that are held by the vast majority living in that society or our society, where stereotypes and discrimination is the norm, right? And then, so that is just, institutional inequity is just kind of one of the reasons. Poverty is another reason. So home ownership helps families accumulate wealth and take advantage of sizable tax savings. However, by contrast, being forced into a rental market can set off a domino effect of events that can make it more difficult to exit from poverty. So in this way, we get economically depressed neighborhoods, and then persistent earning gaps have been made it more difficult for Hispanics to catch up. And then in addition to that, we have employment disparities, right? So disparities in transportation and being able to get to achieve good credit in order to get licenses. I mean, even a simple getting a driver's license can be very difficult in the Hispanic community. Reading road signs, I mean, even simple things like that, because they're all in English. The majority of them are not translated in other languages. I mean, the lack of being able to teach their own kids how to drive and the cost of driving classes. Lack of childcare. A lot of Hispanic families, only one parent can be out to work because of lack of childcare. And then being taken advantage of in the employment industry as a whole. So not getting paid high enough, and then Hispanic families not feeling comfortable speaking up against that because of history, right? Even recent history, people are still going through deportations and being pulled over and assumed that they're illegal just because they're Hispanic. So a couple myths that I wanted to review with you guys. So a common myth is kids who drop out are mostly disconnected, right? Schools failing to engage the students. So this leads to mostly school-based strategies to improve student achievement, attendance, and behavior. So some of the facts, so there are certainly a lot of disconnected youth of color, but while the strategy is targeted to this population can certainly do a lot to minimize push factors from students, they may do nothing to address why many students, in particular, a critical mass of Latinos, may be pulled away from school. So a recent Urban Institute research in Langley Park, Central American immigrant area outside of Washington, D.C., found that high school dropouts in the neighborhood weren't disconnected. They were leaving school early to work, which was at a rate 4 times higher than the national average. So they were just trying to essentially help their families economically. That's nearly 75% of all Latinos stopping to attend school, either before or after graduating from high school, so that they can help their families economically. And then additionally, let's see, working in discriminatory conditions often leads to depression, lack of self-confidence, bitterness, and withdrawal from work. Specifically for Hispanic females, earn roughly 54 cents to every dollar earned by a white non-Hispanic male. More than 6 million Latino children were in poverty in 2010. 2/3 of them who came from immigrant parents. Roughly 30% of Hispanics in the US lack healthcare coverage. And then local police, like I said, checking the immigration status of anyone who is reasonably suspect of being in the United States illegally. So this really drives fear, right? So you're driving fear of traveling to and from work, fear of working in general, giving out their name, and even getting their photo taken. So this, in general, increases alcohol abuse, increases violence and drugs because of the need for money, and it increases domestic violence. So I understand the same way that you may review adversities within the community or cultural group, you can also review and recognize your own personal judgment triggers, like you review in the initial training, or implicit biases, like we like to refer. So any one of these adversities within the Hispanic community that they're experiencing in the Hispanic community can be a judgment trigger for you. So it is simply because of the institutional racism that we are brought up in. It is a system that is built against them, and it is built for us. And by us, obviously, I mean white Americans, to be honest. So I know it may feel more comfortable to ignore these or pretend that you don't have any, but it's actually more beneficial and more productive to yourself and the community that you're going to start serving, that you acknowledge them and explore these implicit biases. So an example of exploring these is taking tests like the one I sent you. I'm not sure if anyone was able to complete them. So that was the skin tone test. Was anyone able to take that? Oh, awesome. Thanks, Kimber.
Yes.
Cool. Did anyone want to share some of the results of that and kind of how you digested that information?
I'm happy to share. I've taken it a couple times. It's been a while though. It's probably been like, I don't know, 9 or 10 years. Because I used to take it all the time in college. It's like, I just forgot how like, I don't know if emotional is the right word, but like emotional and like shocked I am when I get the results that like, that I have a strong like preference for white over, or light skin over dark skin.
Mm-hmm.
And just, you know, wanting to not be that way is really, it's a challenging dissonance of like, nope, this is the reality, like this is where I'm at. And it's hard to not be where I want to be. And so it's like so nice to have a starting point to just like keep growing, but it's still a tough reality. And just those, like it's so automatic, and how sad that part is about how like it's so ingrained in culture and how I grew up and all of those things that it's just like, I just had a kiddo, so it like a couple months ago. So it's too like, it really put that perspective of like, wait, how can we not have this be as big of a thing for him? You know, to like, what representation can we have that is positive instead of these negative images of dark skinned people? And even, I know I'm kind of rambling, but even like thinking of Disney movies and things like that, their characters are darker skin. And that's kind of that generation that I grew up on, just how much that exposure in media impacts how we see the world.
Speaking of Disney movies, I think Holly is Frozen. Right? Just thinking that.
Holly, I don't know if you can hear us, but we cannot hear you. Oh, now you're moving.
Oh, maybe. Oh, nope. I think she got
Did we
kicked out
lose her?
completely.
And
Oh,
we're
there you
back.
are.
Came back.
Oh, hey.
Hey.
Hey again.
back, Holly.
Thank you. Sorry, guys. What a night. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing, Kimber. I don't think I caught it all, but I think I caught the majority of it. So thank you so much for being vulnerable enough to share and being honest, because essentially that is the goal, is to be making being honest with yourself regarding your biases and your judgment triggers a common occurrence, right? Because we all have them, so we just have to be honest and be aware of them. So it's important to tackle them head on and keep yourself in check. So when you are triggered, you can run through a process such as, okay, acknowledging that you're triggered. What is the situation, and is your judgment actually validated, or is it just something that's ingrained from you since you were born and raised? And then if not, let's start rewriting those truths, right? So as you're getting to know who you're volunteering with in the Hispanic community, individual members is a really great way to rewrite those truths and to get past those implicit biases and to really grow as a person. So I just wanted to focus on some, there we go.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
So could you talk a little bit about, and maybe you already will, moms and children in the Latinx community and some of the differences between, I realize there is the cultural equity differences, but are there also in particular differences in that I could be sensitive to as a MomsBloom volunteer when I'm coming in for a first time mama, or a mom who's overwhelmed with her infant and children? Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Kelly. I am actually going to be getting into those. So if you, once I run through all of the rest of the slides, just let me know if I didn't answer your question, okay? Cool. So some cultural considerations to have when serving the Latinx community. So reviewing what I was going through with knowing the distinctions between Spanish, Latino or Latina, Hispanic, and Latinx is really important starting out. So the Hispanic communities, although they are very incredibly diverse, have some basic deep-rooted similarities. So the first one is Personalismo, so the importance of immediate or an extended family ties. Simpatía is placing greater value on interpersonal harmony, and Personalismo is the practice of being people-centered living. So the first one, here we go. Okay. So the first and foremost, it's top priority to have trust, right? To build trust. So how many of you shop nowadays on the reviews of others for a single item? Yeah, so I think that's like a basic norm now, right? So we always look at the reviews of others. So the Hispanic community has been doing this for centuries. It's all about word of mouth and the reviewing from others, whether it's in your family, with your neighbors, friends at the stores, etc. And so they're the ones who they rely on, right? So Personalismo is a central Latinx cultural value. It involves dedication, commitment, and loyalty to family. So this includes regularly spending time with one's immediate and extended family. It also involves seeking the family's advice for important decisions. So sometimes Personalismo means putting the family above oneself. So it's very probable that you would experience this when you're serving as a Hispanic family. This is a generalization. But it is important to think through how you can navigate having multiple family members in the family home at one time. This may include extended family members instead of just like immediate families. So whether that is mothers, aunts, uncles, cousins, and they may all be opinionated about the newborn's care, or what the new mom might be doing, or how she might be taking care of that newborn. And then there also might be multiple children in the family. I'm going to turn it over to Alejandro to go through some more examples of this.
All right, yeah, I'm kind of an expert because my parents, so I learned quite a bit about this growing up. One thing that you might want to be aware of is if you're entering a home, you could encounter different levels of strictness among the family. It's really, really important that the children are, behaving properly and, helping out the family whenever possible. I mean, from the youngest age that, they can walk and help put away plates or clean up something or do anything around the house, like they will be expected to. And that's very normal. Many families are strict with their children to respect their elders. So that's really, really important, especially if you're going into a house that has multiple family members. You might see children interacting with people older than just their parents. And it's very, very important to respect them in those interactions as well. Another thing you might be maybe, and this is a generalization as well, surprised to see is there's sometimes varying levels of physical punishments. So while a lot of parents nowadays might not even consider spanking their children or anything like that, it's not uncommon for a Hispanic parent to whip out a sandal or a shoe and kind of hit their child to discipline them. That's something that I think most Hispanic kids have been through and grown up with, but it does whip them into shape pretty well. I think I stopped misbehaving after my first sandal. So this is a norm that you might have to observe. And as long as you see that, there isn't a line being crossed or that there's no clear abuse or anything like that happening, it's best to remember that you aren't necessarily there to change cultural thinking or to challenge the idea of whether it's okay or not to like spank your children, but understand that these are things that are cultural differences as well.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Okay, so the second one, let me go to the next slide, is simpatia. So this is placing greater value on interpersonal harmony. So this includes a positive social behavior that emphasizes empathy, respect towards others, and harmony. So interpersonal relationships are seldom tense or unpleasant. So there's a warmth in personal relationships, and they emphasize a great deal of emphasis on respecting human dignity. So people always take time to greet one another with a show of genuine pleasure, asking about their health and family. So it's really important to make sure that you're developing good relationships when you're working with the Hispanic community and individuals, making sure you're checking in on them individually to show that you care. And this also includes consistency in showing up. So to keep in mind, you looking someone the wrong way, not saying hello, kind of just brushing by them, or using a negative or more hostile tone of voice. These are all very important things to consider when trying to build trust, right? So you want to avoid those things. And so the other face of simpatia is a tendency to avoid open conflict or unpleasantness. So this might mean you stepping into a family situation that is quite tense and that might not be easily resolved, right? If they are trying to avoid that open conflict. Okay. The next and last one is personalismo. So the concept of personalismo is often defined as a formal friendliness. Basically means the Latinos place great emphasis on personal relationships. So the Latin culture is both people-oriented and collectivist, meaning that Latinos generally value personal relationships over status, material gain, and institutional relationships. So an example when it comes to healthcare, or Latinos may read the neutral or business-like effect of Western doctors as negative. If the physician seems hurried, detached, or aloof, a Latino might experience resentment or be dissatisfied with the care. This reduces the likelihood of compliance with the doctor's recommendations for treatment and follow-up. So this is in the same way with volunteers going to people's homes. You want to make sure that you're attentive, that you take your time with them, you show respect, and whenever possible, use an interpreter to communicate in Spanish. So during non-COVID times, we would recommend physical gestures such as a handshake or even placing a hand on the shoulder to help communicate warmth. But during COVID times, obviously we want to make sure that we're following CDC guidelines. So do you guys have any ideas of how you can continue to communicate warmth when you are working with the Hispanic community while still following CDC guidelines?
I think making good
Um,
oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say smiling. I
Yeah.
mean, when it's something that is obviously not during a very, critical conversation that shouldn't be smiled about, but, just when you say hi, just a genuine smile.
Right, exactly. What were you going to say, Carrie?
Oh, I was going to say making good eye contact. Since we're all wearing masks these days, at least people can see our eyes. So I think if we can like really make a conscious effort to communicate through our eyes, through strong eye contact and smiling with your eyes.
Yes, definitely. I would definitely say make sure that you're listening well as well, or in addition to that, to make sure that you can remember things for next time, to make sure that they understand that you are paying attention and that you are caring and you do care about their well-being, and fostering the relationship between you both. So basically building trust is key. So you can always show this through consistency, making sure that you're not canceling, especially at the last minute, making sure that you're showing up, and so that will show them that they can rely on you and that you care enough to show up. Okay, and then some additional cultural considerations to take into consideration. So we want to keep in mind that situations you may encounter maybe as a result of an adversity the Hispanic community is experiencing, or it may be a cultural difference between white and American culture and the Hispanic culture, or it might be a result of both. So some examples of this is cleanliness. So depending on their country of origin, you may encounter families who are originally from rural areas, living in different conditions than we're used to here in the United States. So this may include dirty floors or dirty walls. And then this also may include insects such as cockroaches living in their homes. So our Western view dictates this as wrong or unsanitary. However, when they were in their home country, this is something that they wouldn't think twice about because it was normal to live closer to nature. So what you can do if you are uncomfortable, because like I said before, it is important to recognize when recognize your own feelings and own judgment triggers, etc. Is to maybe not sit down, maybe explain that because of course they'll offer for you to sit down in their home, they want you to feel comfortable as well. But explaining that, oh, I've sat all day, I want to stretch my legs, or offering to do something for them that doesn't include sitting down. And then maybe this includes maybe not bringing in personal items into the home, and then changing and washing your clothes when you get home and removing your shoes. And then I'm going to turn it back over to Alejandro to go through a couple more examples.
So some other things that you might encounter that could be potentially uncomfortable situations, or things that you might have to kind of think ahead and plan your responses or reactions to, is it's not completely uncommon in some cultures for men to speak on behalf of a woman. Sometimes you'll see this maybe like in certain situations when you would be originally trying to speak to the mother, and you might get a response from the father instead. And it can kind of throw you off quite a bit because obviously you are intending to speak to the mother. So one way of managing this would be to acknowledge the father, and remain respectful and kind. And then maybe if you can try and find a moment alone with the mother, that might be a better way to navigate that, so that you don't have to completely ignore the father or anything like that, because it is a cultural difference, and it is something that they would not see in the same way as maybe a Western view, where we might say, oh, that's very sexist or something like that. To them, it might not be perceived that way. And then another thing that might be surprising is sometimes there are very young mothers in the Latino communities. You could see very young teenagers having children and, cleaning the house and fully working, something that you might expect from typically an older mother. But this happens in many cultures, not just Latino cultures. So it's something that you should observe and be prepared to deal with as well.
And then lastly, I know you wanted to touch on mental health. So it's important to understand that mental health and speaking about it, especially with persons outside of the family, is very much taboo in the Hispanic culture. So it's not common to talk about your mental health at all. Like I said, especially with members that aren't within your family, they may actually take steps to try to hide that they may be feeling depressed and experiencing postpartum depression, for example, so that you don't suspect anything. So it's really important to respect this, especially when you're trying to build consistency and trust with them. However, on the kind of opposite side, because obviously you're there to support them, which includes supporting them through their mental, through any mental cycles that they may be going through, whether it be postpartum depression or really any other situations that they may be encountering. It's obviously your goal to support them in anything that they may be experiencing. So I would recommend that towards the end of your volunteering, I know conducting the Edinburgh postnatal depression scale is something that you go through in your initial training. So when you are wanting to do this, like I said, recommended towards the end of your volunteering, it's very important to be direct when you're speaking to the mothers. Don't beat around the bush. Ask them straight out the questions while also being sympathetic, right? So, so an example of this is, if they do have suicidal thoughts, right? Ask them straight out if they're experiencing that. Let them know that this is a norm, that it is okay, and that they're not alone. But you want to make sure that you're being direct with them. And then you also want to make sure to check your tone of voice to make sure you're not coming across as judgmental in any way. So overall, the importance is observation. I know we've been going through some extreme examples, some common examples, whether it's disparities, cultural differences, just considerations that you would like to take as you move forward in serving the Hispanic community. But observation is key. And understanding your implicit biases or your judgment triggers. So the importance is kind of to leave your worldview and opinions at the door and to be open to learn anything, something new. Be willing to try to create a personal relationship with the people that you're serving, because that's extremely important to them. And yeah, just be kind and loving. The next is kind of the last thing I wanted to go over. I know that you provide quite a few resources on your website, and some that include resources for Spanish speakers, but I also wanted to include, I don't know if you're already working with Strong Beginnings, but they do have quite a few resources there. And so they're designed to provide the support specifically for Latinx and African American community members. And they do that throughout different programming once the clients are enrolled. So that's another resource that you can also refer your clients to, because they do have Spanish speakers over there as well. But but that is basically it. I wanted to come back to Kelly just to make sure that I answered your question, or if you had any more specific situations or questions that you might have.
No, I think you did a wonderful job. I'm sorry I asked it so soon. I should have
Oh,
waited.
you're worried. You're totally fine.
But no, I really appreciate. I appreciate, and I did I did home care and hospice for 12 years,
Oh,
and
awesome.
many of my clients were Hispanic or Latino, and I really appreciate the refresher, and it just brought back a lot of great memories. So
Awesome. That's awesome. Does anyone else have any questions that we can try to answer today? Or if you think of any, I can also put my email in the chat in case you think of any later that you want to address.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
I'm working with I'm volunteering for a lady that's from Malaysia right now, and
Okay.
I'm hoping to get a translator. I think we're in the process of like working with that, but
Sure.
some of the stuff I just have trouble explaining. One scenario was like she's a young mother and she's wondering why I don't have kids or a family right now, and I really don't know like how to explain to her in like correct terms, like because I don't know if her marriage was arranged or what her situation was, but
Sure.
I have trouble explaining to her like I get to pick my husband, like I like she's like you can have kids right now, and I'm like doesn't really work that way. So there's like their cultural differences right there, and I don't know how to come across her like
Right.
in a good way.
Yeah. Because I know that you want to be as sensitive as possible. Yeah. But also making sure that you're explaining the situation correctly. So I would just recommend not being vague, but starting out kind of vague, and then if she wanted to go into detail to have that conversation with you, then that's something that it can be kind of put on her. So like maybe suggesting you just say, oh, I'm actually not focused on that right now. I'm focused on getting my schooling, or just on different, I actually have different priorities right now, but maybe someday, you know what I mean? Even if you don't want to have kids someday, just kind of giving a general answer. And if she wanted to talk more in depth with you and to create that more personal relationship, to get more information, then she can kind of decide how deep in the conversation she wants to go. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, she's like asking me why I'm not dating or anything right now either. And I'm just like, I don't know how to explain it to you. Like, it doesn't work that way. If I wanted to date, it's not as easy as, so just kind of cultural differences there.
Sorry about that. So can you repeat that? Did that answer your question, or did you have any more questions?
Yeah, I was just saying that she keeps like trying to ask me more about it, and I don't know how to explain to her.
Oh.
Like, yeah, so she wants to know, and I'm like open to like telling her about my life, but don't know how to explain to her that I get to choose the person I want to date and things like that.
Yeah, so I would just recommend continuing to try to be as sensitive as possible, because obviously you don't want to offend them. But at the same time, if she's really wondering about that and why you're not having kids now, I would just say to be more open and to have an open conversation with her, especially if an interpreter is there, and then they can interpret the meaning of what you're saying accurately. Then that's something that will help you build a stronger relationship with her, which I think would be great.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Holly, may I jump?
Yeah, of course. So Marisol is one of our amazing interpreters. So yes.
So Alisa, I will say.
Feel free to put your insight.
Yeah, sorry, this is just me. I will say educate. Just always try to educate. In this case, maybe just give her like, oh, well, here in America, the ages in which people, usually get married, so that she knows that you're not the only one. And most of the time is, the cultural differences is us not knowing. You know, it's we see it so normal to get married, you know, so young that, you know, they will be like, oh my God, you're already 20. What? And you're what? And it's so normal to get those reactions. But you know, sometimes just, you know, educating, saying, you know, and I'm not the only one. You know, my mom got married when she was, you know, after she finished, you know, after she went to school, and that is so normal. You know, I'm actually, you know, I'm still too young, according to my family, to get married, and I do agree. And sometimes just, you know, giving the insight on how it is in this part of the world will give them a little bit of education. You know, just like Holly said, you know, just being a little bit broad and just, you know, give them, you know, just information, so that they know that it's okay, so that they don't have that reaction with every people, because they're gonna encounter more than one. And you don't want them to have that reaction like every single time, because eventually they're gonna know that this is normal. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you, Maddie. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else have any more questions?
My name is Danelle, and I just also wanted to, at least for my family, I'm Puerto Rican, at least for my family, whenever I had friends over, whether from college or, you know, just work related, one of the things that I was always conscious of afterwards was how loud my family is. And that everyone sounds, when they're speaking in Spanish, you know, they're very dramatic. And so a couple of times I do remember in college people saying, wow, was there an argument happening? And I was like, not at all. Everybody was having a great time. And it just seemed like it was very dramatic and everyone was into it. But I just always thought that was funny, because for me, that was normal, just how loud everybody spoke, the volume, and also everyone using their hands. And then at the same time, you know, for my friends who had never encountered that, at, you know, weeks later, so it was still on their mind, and then they'd say, you know, were we there during an argument? And I was like, oh, not at all. You know, we were having a party.
Yeah.
So I've just always had that at front and center. And nowadays I can kind of say that ahead of time, like, oh, by the way, if you're coming over, this is what's normal.
Yeah, thank you so much. That kind of points me in a different direction as well, actually, because I know that you guys have restrictions like not taking food over to their house, but you can help with food preparation. So it's really common in the Hispanic community to want to offer you food. And so, Kimber, you might have to include this kind of how you want to proceed as well. If you would like your volunteers to be able to accept that or not accept it based on their comfort level. But what we as interpreters go through is the say no process. So you want to make sure that you're being gracious in saying no, but you want to give reasons why you're saying no, whether it's your comfort level, whether it's COVID, whether it's, you know, kind of blaming it on Kimber, saying that you're not allowed to, or, and then you want to make sure to really thank them and to let them know that, oh, I understand that that's important to you. I thank you so much, but I'm going to have to pass this time. You know what I mean? Because I know that is very common. At the Hispanic Center, we have regular potlucks before COVID. And so we've been missing that community even within the staff. And so I know that going into people's home, it's going to be, I would say, pretty hard, but maybe, Kimber, that's something that you can address, kind of what your policy is, and then depending on if you want volunteers to be able to kind of use their discretion, how they should be answering that as well. Any other questions from anybody? Well, I went ahead and I put my, oh, I did not include this. I apologize. I didn't go to the next slide. So that's the resource that I was talking about. They have a ton of resources for the Hispanic community. They have Spanish speakers over there, and then they can enroll the clients in their own programs. And I'll make sure to share the slides with you guys if you want to go back and reference them. And then make sure if you are able to follow us on social media. So we try our best to communicate as much as possible. Any resources, any events that are for the community. We're hoping to be able to have our Hispanic festival at some capacity this year, and would be really glad to see any of you guys there. And then again, just feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or any more scenarios you would like to walk through. And then we're always open for you to refer your clients as well, because we have a ton of programs that I didn't go over today. So like I